Hey, welcome to the JodoCast. There's a special breaking news episode, a discussion thing. We've done these discussions before where we sit here and talk at the internet, which is something that people do. Evan's in a rage. Leo is stoic, and I'm here. The news is there was a press release today from Atomic Mass Games, who up until now have only made Marvel Crisis Protocol, which I think is a very cool and fun game. But I played it once. I think it's cool. Asmodee has shifted, what do you want to call it, ownership of Star Wars Legion, X-Wing, and Armada to Atomic Mass from Fantasy Flight. Fantasy Flight has lost these three games that we love, and Atomic Mass now is in charge of them. That's the news. We're going to talk about what it means for the sake of the future of humanity.
Yeah. I mean, we should say at this point that is all the facts we know.
Well, there's
basically, and the fact that I think they said Simone Elliott
is
yes.
Now
that was very important.
The studio
Atomic,
lead.
Atomic Games as head of studio there.
But
so everything past this point now is speculation.
I've got one half fact from the press release is that joining them will be key members of the teams involved in the creation and evolution of Fantasy Flight's current Star Wars miniatures games.
But no names. So
right, no names. So some people who are currently working on those games or who have worked on them will be carrying over. We don't know who or how many or whatever.
And even to that point, there's been people familiar with what's going on at Fantasy Flight, basically saying that everybody on the design teams are just finding out about this at the same time as the public. So, I mean, and that's pretty normal. I mean, but every time I've ever been in a company where something similar has happened, they're not going to tell, all the randos working there ahead of time.
I feel like to us,
it sucks for the employees, and it's really terrible, especially since the Atomic Mass is headquartered out of Seattle. So I'm assuming, that's probably going to mean anybody who wants to stay on is probably going to end up having to pick up their lives and move. If not, we don't know. Are they going to be out of jobs? Is there going to be somewhere else in Fantasy Flight for these people? We don't know. But one way or another, I feel real bad for all these people who've been working on these games.
Yeah, and I think to us, I feel like the lead designers of the games feel like they have this kind of really high status in the company. But I imagine from the people making these kind of huge decisions, they're no different from any of the other employees, which is why they're just finding out too. This is what happened with the RPGs. What was it, back in January already, when Fantasy Flight shut down their RPG department, and then Asmodee created this new company called Edge that's handling all the RPGs now.
Well, they didn't create. It's been around.
Okay.
It had been around.
And they owned it already?
Well, yes. they had already owned it, and Edge had been doing European translations.
Yeah. So it definitely feels like Asmodee is trying to take Fantasy Flight and break off, okay, well, this company's going to do all the RPG stuff we own. Now this company, Atomic Mass, they're going to do all the miniatures game stuff. That kind of seems like what they're doing, and that's potentially totally fine from a business. This is the first time I've been, because I have I care about designers of these games because they make products that we love, and I've had personal interactions with a number of them, and so it really sucks to think that maybe they're not going to have a hand in the games I like anymore, potentially, or that they're, having all this personal bullshit dumped on them out of nowhere by what feels like, more venture capitalist type bullshit that from Asmodee corporate land.
Yeah, essentially.
I think the big questions I have right now are which staff are choosing to stick with their games, which staffs are choosing not to, which staffs don't have that choice at all. I'm not sure if many of those answers we'll ever get. And is this going to affect... Some people are already afraid that the price of all these games are going to go up because Crisis Protocol is more expensive than the Star Wars games, which seems like a silly worry because I don't think the products are going to change at all, other than instead of the Fantasy Flight logo, you'll see the Atomic Mass logo.
Yeah, I mean, it's sort of like, I think when, like, I forget exactly when it happened, like a year ago or so, when they moved the Fantasy Flight's sleeves, to Game Genic. They're the exact same sleeves, they just changed the logo on it.
Right. Yeah, I think that's
certainly true.
I don't think there's going to be any pricing changes.
Yeah, no, I mean, there's a lot of reasons why Crisis Protocol is more expensive. I mean, they're made out of a totally different material. Those are, are they hard plastic or are they resin?
They're hard plastic, I think.
Okay, they are hard plastic.
They are hard plastic.
I don't know why I was thinking they were resin. I think because you were bitching about resin the one day.
Who, me?
No, Evan or Joe, and I thought it was
me.
Joe.
Joe's never worked with
resin. I've done the Harry Potter minis, which I think are resin. Maybe it was John. Really? John had some Harry Potter minis too, I think. Resin is weird.
It could be.
Yeah, I don't know.
I'm the one.
Maybe I'm thinking of when you're doing the Harry Potters. I remember you complaining about resin. I don't know why. It's fine.
Maybe the Marvel license just costs that much more for them to have that Star Wars license.
I mean, I have heard that the Marvel license is more expensive than Star Wars, but again, that's just like shit I've read on Reddit. So who the fuck knows?
Yeah. I'm very curious to see if this affects like production. Like, were there expansions planned that are now going to not? Maybe things are going to... Are there going to be any delays in how quickly we see products come out? And that sounds very selfish because, again, I'm mostly feel bad about the staff that are being affected by this. Yeah. But the community are going to want, expect these expansions to come out at a regular pace. And is there going to be any hiccups? Are we going to see a big gap in this transition period where we don't get any products at all?
I wouldn't be surprised if we see some kind of hiccup. But I think it'll be a ways down the road. Just because like back in February, they said they have their Legion product line planned out through 2023. So the wheels are already turning on a lot of that shit.
Right. It's not like if there's a new team working on it, they're going to throw that all out the window. They're going to keep building on what's already there.
Yeah, I there's not going to be like I see lots of people on the internet on Facebook especially who are like, "Oh God, are we getting Legion 2.0?"
Yeah, I'd like to take this moment to thank Leo for doing the front lines exposure journalism of bothering to go all over Facebook and
through all kinds of
read all those dumb comments.
Takes.
I'll certainly expand on why that's a very worthless take later, but
I mean, I don't, and same thing like. We just had 2nd edition X-Wing. They're not going to do 3rd edition anytime soon.
No.
Armada people are so used to declaring their game dead that I think they're all saying that a lot of them are saying the game's dead, but I think there's people in the Armada community who would declare the game dead if Fantasy Flight announced a new ship. That's it. Game's
That's
dead.
the last one they've.
Yeah. Well, I guess there's no real good segue into this, but I mean, there's so many ways to look at this whole situation, because I've been trying all night long until getting on here to wrap my head around what could be the resource management reason for this. Like, is Asmodee as the umbrella corporation just trying to put all of the pieces into their own not cubicles, but
bin, a cubby,
incubators, to have all of the miniatures of their company in their own little incubator?
I mean, that's what it sounds like, because like they did with the RPGs and the card sleeves, it's all getting
yeah, except that, I mean, if we are going to use Edge Studios as our precedent for Asmodee telling FFG, hey, all that stuff you worked on, we're going to take that out of your studio and put that into somebody else's studio, particularly someone across an ocean, and we're still going to have all of the usual freelancers developing presumably more adventures for these systems and develop other game systems that no one asked for. They have yet to really bear fruit, and granted, like you said, it's only been since February, somewhere in there, that Edge Studios...
Almost a year with no word.
Wasn't Edge based in Spain?
Yes.
I mean,
Spain.
They probably had COVID issues.
Entire year, and I think the only word we've got from Edge Studios has been, we can't talk about Star Wars.
Also, we have a Twitter account now. That also happened from them recently.
Well, and here's the thing: is that they have been doing work for years. They've been translating other works, particularly FFG works, for years, and that's fine. Like, they're part of the family already. They've been doing the work. That's fine. But it's a far cry from translating to developing and designing.
Mm-hmm.
And if they're just going to say, well, don't worry about it, we're freelancing everything out to all the people that already worked on it, it's like, that's fine, I guess, except that we've already seen, like, the lead designer of FFG SWRPG go away. So I don't know that says much for just if we're going to use Edge Studios as our precedent.
Well,
and it's the only precedent we have.
Yeah, but I think it's a little bit of a different situation. Like you said, they've not done much more than translating there. Not a lot of actual development. Atomic Mass Games, on the other hand, already has one really successful game under their belt, and the company is made up of a bunch of people who had already been working in the industry at Privateer Press.
And we know from the press release that at least one, I guess there's a minimum of one, somewhere between one and an infinite number of people currently working on these games will be transferring to Atomic Mass.
That's another potential, not issue for us, the consumer, but issue for the two sub companies. if you're going to take, and for all the conspiracy theorists, we need to say this isn't the Star Wars license. The license is with Asmodee. Asmodee is up here, and all the subsidiary companies are along here. So the license is not changing hands. It's the product, the Legion, X-Wing, Armada products.
So we still could see an Outer Rim expansion from Fantasy Flight.
Right. Fantasy Flight still has Rebellion and Outer Rim and Imperial Assault if they ever decide to keep doing anything with that.
Yes.
Because I think...
If I'm pointing at somebody, I'm pointing at Bill right this second.
Point the other way.
This way.
That way, yes.
That way.
Because Imperial Assault's still dead, and even though Steve Horvath teased a bit, I think if somehow it weren't dead, it would stay with Fantasy Flight.
Yes,
because
absolutely.
It's much more of a board game than a miniatures game like the other ones. As much as people like to think it's a miniatures game. And they, Fantasy Flight called it a miniatures game for the longest time to try and resist Hasbro's licensing
it's
stuff.
It's an adventure game in a galaxy far, far away.
I mean, it's like Descent. Descent, it's kind of a miniatures game, mostly a board game.
And that brings up so many more issues. Oh my gosh. So I'm going to, as I always say, bracket this conversation. All they've mentioned has been Star Wars miniatures.
Yeah.
They haven't said anything else. They've just said Star Wars, Legion, X-Wing, Armada.
Those are the only miniatures games they have.
But that's okay.
At the moment, Rune Wars to come back?
At the moment, they only have 3.
Yeah. Yep.
But they have the potential for a lot more.
Well, there's nothing to stop.
I'm not.
They could have those made at Atomic Mass though instead of Fantasy Flight.
Sure,
but maybe Atomic Mass will resurrect Rune Wars.
Okay, then I take back everything I ever said about them.
Let's for the record, Evan has a beef with Atomic Mass because one year at the Fantasy Flight in-game report, they're like, and here's these new guys who don't work for Fantasy Flight here to talk, and Evan was like, they're talking about non-Fantasy Flight at my Fantasy Flight thing, and ever since, he's hated them. Is that true? That's accurate.
True. But I've also felt like their art direction has felt...
Art direction? They've had... it's all... They only have one game.
Yes, and the art direction on it has felt bizarre.
Seemed fine to me.
And we don't know what I'm talking about, because half of it is like MCU, and the other half is like 90s Marvel, and the other half is like 1960s Marvel.
Are you talking about a Crisis Protocol or that card game from Fantasy Flight? No, I thought the card game was the one with the weird art.
The card game looks like Pizza Hut Book It comics. Even if it's a good system, which I believe it probably is, even though they have Thwip as a stat, and Thwip only applies to 3 characters. But
I will say, if Spider-Verse of characters that apply,
if you've got an issue with their art,
that's fair.
It's almost a guarantee that their art will be the same for the Star Wars games because they've been pulling from the same artists and pool of Star Wars art since forever.
Bracket.
And I doubt they'd lose access to that or decide to change that.
All of their Star Wars art to all of their Marvel art. It's ridiculous. So that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the art direction over at Atomic Mass Games. It's like their designers don't know what era of Marvel they want to do. But I wonder most especially...
I guess I'm not sure really what you're talking about.
I bought and painted a core set of Crisis Protocol, and I thought everything in it was lovely. The character cards have a bit more comic booky art, and then like the tactics cards have more of the art like you'd see on a Star Wars game, where it's a bit more realistic looking, I think. If I remember right. I never had no artwork ever struck me as weird. But like again, even if it was weird, I don't think
fine.
the games they're stealing or adopting, or however you want to, what your viewpoint is on it, they already have established art design, and I don't think we should expect something like that to change.
No, but I will say that one problem that I was trying to address a moment ago, that is not a consumer issue, but an employee issue, is if you're going to take this property, this game, well, all three games, X-Wing, Legion, Armada, and take them and presumably some of their teams and port them over to Atomic Mass to form new teams, probably not whole departments, but just teams, are you going to have the previous teams step on top of the Atomic Mass teams, or it's going to be supplementary to the existing Atomic Mass Marvel team? So, I mean, that's the kind of thing you run into with any job. Like Leo was saying, any sort of
You're asking,
reorganization, you're going to run into
is there going to
that.
be some sort of culture conflict between the ex Fantasy Flight guys and the people who are already at Atomic Mass?
I mean, I'm looking at it from Atomic Mass's perspective. Do I really want, I've been developing this game that has sold gangbusters. Am I going to have somebody else coming in and telling me what to do? And if I'm on FFG team going over to Seattle, like, am I going to be subservient to somebody else? But that's like
they're already putting an FFG person in as head of studio there, so
that's true too. But I'm worried from that perspective. I'm worried that it's going to affect the product more than anything else.
I mean, I guess again, we don't know, but I would assume if you're working on X-Wing right now, you're probably just going to port over into the same position over on the X-Wing team.
Presumably, yeah.
Presumably, and yeah, and then there will probably be holes plugged from, people at Atomic Mass on your teams. But I mean, I don't think Luke Eddy is going to move over. I mean, maybe they'll do that, but I can't imagine like they would have Luke Eddy move over to Atomic Mass and then have them say, "Well, you're not lead design. You're not, the lead designers on the game anymore. You're just, a
drone,
or whatever, and Jim Atomic over here is going to be lead designer for."
Yeah.
He's the son of the boss.
Yep.
Well, hey, if it's Blizzard, yeah. But I mean, I don't mean to hijack your hosting position, Joe, but I brought up on Discord earlier about how this is very much, it reminds me of when Wizards of the Coast bought TSR.
What is TSR? How have I never heard those letters?
Leo, you want to take it away, or shall I go?
What, TSR?
Yeah, TSR.
TSR is the company that was formed by Gary Gygax when to sell and distribute Dungeons and Dragons. Fool.
I see. I was thinking you were referencing something in the history of the Star Wars license.
Oh, no.
I was like, didn't Decipher have it before Wizards of the Coast?
They did not. I mean, back in those days, back when I was a child and you didn't exist yet, that was TSR.
Those were the good old days.
I'm sorry. I'm just such an old fart now. Like, it's Monday night. I'm having my bourbon. But back in those days, TSR, Tactical Strategies. Help me out. Tactical Strategy Readers? I don't recall. It was something very pompous. Was the company
Requiem.
that maybe it could have been.
Nerds love that word.
It's true.
Tactical Studies Rules.
There you go. Tactical Studies Rules.
I was gonna say I seem to remember the name making no sense.
Should it be Tactical Studies Rule? !
Pretty much. And then SSR was the digital version.
Isn't that like the precursor to the CIA?
I think you're thinking of the Russians.
No, before the CIA during World War II, it was the Secret Service was...
I don't know. I'll have to play Metal Gear Solid 3 again. But, so TSR was based on...
the precursor to S.H.I.E.L.D. in the Marvel Universe was the...
Oh, never mind. I'm thinking of the OSS. Sorry. There were two S's, but a different letter.
And no, I think that it was like the SSR or the SRS or something like that was the precursor to S.H.I.E.L.D. in the MCU.
Okay, so TSR, based out of Wisconsin. Like,
oh, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. You know what we're talking about.
The cheese.
So Lake Geneva / Milwaukee was where Dungeons and Dragons was born. And then 1999, Wizard of the Coast in Seattle buys the bankrupt TSR, and they take their entire department out of Milwaukee / Lake Geneva and transport them all to Seattle. And they keep working there in the same building as the Magic the Gathering people. And that's what this kind of sounds like, too, is they're going to take everyone out of Roseville, Minnesota, and move them out to Seattle. But is it everybody, or is it just...
The press release said key. So maybe that means it's just going to be like head designers and stuff, and... everyone else is just going to get shuffled around to other projects.
Yeah, hopefully the people who are working on these games and choose not to or aren't allowed to move over get something else to do at Fantasy Flight, because it's not like they don't still have a lot going on there. And that's one of the... I don't think it's going to be an issue, but it's one thing that comes to mind as far as what some little like spice of the Star Wars products is a while back when I think it might have been when I was talking to some of the Imperial Assault designers. They said they love talking to I guess it doesn't even matter anymore, the role-playing game department, because
they're all in Europe now.
Right, because they're like, oh, well, we need a unit that can like fit these mechanical goals. But they know more about like the lore, so we're going to talk to them, and they can like suggest, oh, you should use a weak white pirate for that. And I guess that won't be a thing anymore. I don't like to say that you have to be a huge Star Wars nerd to work on Star Wars. I think it's good if there are people who aren't super into Star Wars working on Star Wars sometimes. But when it comes to the game stuff, I like people working on it to like understand the lore so that they can like design them with the right flavor, which they've been doing well so far for the most part, except for Chopper in X-Wing, at least in 1.0.
Hey, Chopper in LCG, 10 out of 10. Actually, all of Spectre in LCG was 10 out of 10.
And Imperial Assault.
That's true. Same vintage.
You know, honestly, I kind of think this might be a good thing in a way for Fantasy Flight. Because even Fantasy Flight has admitted that, like, getting the Star Wars license was almost too much for them. Like, they grew too fast. And that's something they've, like, what's his face?
Abe Lincoln.
Yes.
Steve Horvath.
No. The guy.
Christian Navarro.
No, not Christian. The It wasn't it. Well, no, wasn't Navarro the guy after Christian?
Christian Peterson.
No, not Christian Peterson. Navarro. What was his first name?
Andrew.
Andrew. Yeah. In like
we got there.
Yeah, Andrew Navarro and his.
That's the planet from Mandalorian.
Yep. And now he's got to go to Caladan.
What?
That's the name of the city he's going to. It's a city called Caladan.
I think it's I'll miss Caladan so much.
Yes. Tell me of the waters of your homeworld, Din.
Usul.
I'm
sorry, Joe.
It's
Joe
very
Joe
rude when you guys make nice references that are beyond me.
Shit, what was
I forgot. I feel at one point I just said it was my character to...
Yeah, Andrew Navarro. Yeah, in some interview I was watching with him, he talked about that, how, like, you know, they had a lot of growing pains because they went from being a fairly modest company to having one of the best-selling games out there, you know, and you know, I think on this show we're generally pretty positive towards Fantasy Flight, but they didn't always handle those growing pains the greatest. And I don't know, I think this will let them
focus entirely on Outer Rim.
Yes. Well, I was going to say focus on, I think, the things they do best, which are
board games.
You know, the card games and board games.
Yeah.
Which is funny. I say that because, like I said, their Genesis narrative dice role playing system is still my favorite role playing system I've ever played.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, and
but beyond that, the system I think was great. I still don't 100% care for how they published the game, though. Like, I still hate 3 core books. You know.
Well, and I mean, amongst other things, encounter building is still a mystery to me, at least. But that's a very, you know, as I'm sitting here thinking about in 2012, when you and I were transitioning from doing OSIS on our own to MER, and Fantasy Flight had just gotten the license. I didn't know anything about Fantasy Flight at the time. You know, I had to go look them up and see what they'd done. And, you know, to my surprise, they'd been doing Lord of the Rings, Game of Thrones, all their own stuff. For a long time, they were an established company. They'd more than proven themselves 10 times over. They had, you know, they created an entirely new collectible parentheses non-collectible card game style, one that really appealed to me. And they were like, yep, we're gonna do miniatures and cards and RPGs for Star Wars. And I was totally excited. And we look at Atomic Mass, and sure, the press release that they released said it's made up of industry veterans, and that's fine. But they only have one game under their belt, which made me wonder about how are they going to integrate the FFG teams.
Well, like I said, most of Atomic Mass, like from what I understand, at least all the main people at the studio are all people who left Privateer Press a few years ago. Now, to be honest,
I did not know that.
I have zero experience with any Privateer Press games. I've never played them. I think that Monster Madness or whatever it's called miniatures game looks really cool, but
from everything I've heard, War Machine and Hordes are very good alternatives to Warhammer. Just not with 20 years, 20, 30, 40 years of refinement. But if that's the case, then that makes me very happy because
Yeah, actually, I think one of the guys at Atomic Mass, I think, is actually one of the founders of
Privateer.
Privateer. Maybe not.
Could very well be.
I'm trying to remember Matt Wilson. That sounds because he was one of the founders, and I feel like that's the name of somebody at Atomic Mass. I could be wrong. I don't remember.
I had a weird thought. Do we have Hasbro to thank for X-Wing, Legion, and Armada? Because this is what if Fantasy Flight got the license and they're like, well, we can't make board games because Hasbro has that license, so we're going to have to make card games and miniatures games because we legally can't make Star Wars board games.
Okay.
And so they made miniatures games. Maybe they would never have made the miniatures games if they could have made board games from the start, because they're obviously that's what they were good at the time. Anyways,
that's a very good point. They
I still hate that Hasbro, everything about them.
Well, yeah, as Toy Galaxy says, Hasbro until all are one. But
clever.
Yeah, like their best products previous to Star Wars had been Twilight Imperium,
Cosmic Encounter,
Game of Thrones, both the card game and the board game. And I mean, the whole rune-bound universe, they'd been chugging out several iterations of that before they got to Descent First Edition in 2007, and then Descent Second Edition came out the same year, a few months prior to X-Wing and Netrunner. So, I mean, yeah, you're absolutely right. Their strong suit is board games and card games. And like Leo mentioned in Discord earlier today, they had already made that division between board and card and miniature.
Yeah. If listeners aren't, or watchers, I guess, since this is a video instead of a podcast, weren't aware, not too long ago, Fantasy Flight had already started to split stuff up. They, I think everything just sort of used to be Fantasy Flight games, but internally they sort of divided things up into the board games and card games group and the miniatures group, which was sort of like everyone sort of joked that the miniatures group should have just been called the Star Wars games group.
Yeah.
But
at that point, yeah.
But yeah, so they had already sort of started this split even before this whole Atomic Mass thing had started.
And as far as miniatures go, like I honestly, hand of God, swear on a Bible, don't have any real hope of Rune Wars coming back. What I do have hope for is Legend of the Five Rings miniatures game to be reborn.
Did there used to be one?
What's that?
Was there like an old version of that?
Yes, there was. I mean, way back. Boy, I don't even know who published it, if it was AEG or not. But there was one, and it'd be so easy because a samurai is a samurai. So you buy a bunch of samurai, you paint them whatever color you want, you've got your army. And it would expand their horizons. It would make them more than just, yeah, our miniatures games are Star Wars, like Leo was saying. Because...
Well, and Marvel, the only two properties that matter.
Honestly, yes. And that's what I have felt bad about for FFG since Christian Peterson left, is that they've been, in my opinion, neglecting their own IPs because they have so many external properties. They had Game of Thrones and Lord of the Rings before anyone cared. And they've been continuing to produce those. And they've been doing Cthulhu / Arkham ones. And they're phenomenal.
Isn't their Arkham one kind of an original IP, though?
I mean, yeah, the Arkham universe, it's their own interpretation of the Cthulhu mythos, yeah, which I love this version, their version, so much more. Because, I mean, A, not racist. B, it's much more of an hopeful, action-oriented, like, let's go fight the bad guys, rather than, well, we're gonna die. But, I mean...
You usually die when you play Arkham Horror.
I mean, yeah, we survived the first part of the core game of Arkham Horror LCG the other night, and we got through it. Yeah. It was great. It's a great game.
Yeah, Arkham Horror, the board game. It's basically like Pandemic, only you win even less often than you do in Pandemic.
Yes, that's true.
Well, I think,
but I think them moving the Star Wars miniatures away will let Fantasy Flight refocus their efforts on those things. Kind of like
and it's hopefully that means more content for Outer Rim or more new exciting games like that. As far as the miniatures games go, which I think is the main concern everybody has right now, not. Is this good for Fantasy Flight? We want to know, is this bad for these games that we like?
For us as consumers.
Right. Well, as huge fans of these 3 games, is this going to suck or be good? And I think it's probably, we're not going to notice much of a difference. I think, like you said, there might be a little bit of a hiccup in when they come out. Hopefully they do just as good of it. One of the things I like about Fantasy Flight is the preview articles they put out. I haven't looked at see if Atomic Mass posts those articles beforehand. I really like that. Hopefully they manage to do something similar. I don't expect any of the materials to change.
I do know Atomic Mass is tweets out previews and shit, like tweets out previews and stuff of their things nonstop. Yeah,
they do.
So I don't know. My feeling is, at least for now, it's probably from our end of things. Mm-hmm. It's probably going to be, for the time being, for at least a year or two, neutral. We're not going to see many changes.
I wonder if
I think from the employee side of things, like I said, that's where I feel bad, because I think there's probably more negatives there. For them. If they want to keep their jobs, they have to uproot and move somewhere else, and they may not want to do that. Maybe they do. Personally, if they're, Seattle is maybe the one, Seattle, Pacific Northwest is maybe the one place in the U.S. I would actually want to move.
Same.
Out of Minnesota. Absolutely.
If I'd been in Milwaukee working for TSR and they said, "Hey, you want to move to Seattle?" I'd have said, "Yeah." You gonna pay for it? And they'd say, "Sure, let's go."
Well, we now know the region where we will set up the Jodo commune.
Yes.
Although it'll probably be once you get into the rural Pacific Northwest, you're probably going to find actual communes you don't want to hang out with.
From what I hear, you go east of Seattle, there ain't much.
Except right-wing extremists.
Yeah.
No. So yeah, I think to really assess what this is going to mean for the games, I think it's still going to need to, we're going to need to wait and see who makes it through this. There's already rumors from reputable sources. This is rumors. Nothing
exclamation point, rumors.
But
rumor has it.
But this same person did break the news about the changes with the RPG department before there was any official announcements about it. And that's that at least for Legion, Alex Davey is supposedly out.
Supposedly,
maybe not. I hope not.
Allegedly.
Alex Davey has been responsible for, both X-Wing and Legion
and Armada.
Did he work
I'm pretty sure. I thought he was he came in on X-Wing a couple years into its life, and I think he was the lead on Armada, and he was for sure the lead on Legion.
That's true.
Man, why do I think I
thought he was with an X-Wing from the start.
No, he was not on the start with X. Okay. He started on X-Wing around like wave.
Well, whatever. Something. At any rate,
the exact same post is on Fantasy Flight Games. I didn't.
If the guy's gone, that would be really sad.
Yeah.
So I hope the rumors aren't true. But again, like I said, I think we're gonna have to wait and see, to really say what it could mean for the game. And I mean, at the end of the day, though, I mean, change isn't always bad.
It's not. And
I think, I think like the LCG, when they changed up designers, is when things finally started to get good with that game.
You're going to invoke that with me?
Yep.
Oh.
Yep. And like, the X-Wing 2.0 team isn't necessarily the same team that was started out with first edition.
X-Wing has gone through a lot of different lead design teams,
and I think yes, I thought 2.0 is fantastic.
2.0 is great.
Yes.
Yeah. And that's another thing, though, is that people that are wording about a Legion 2.0, I'm not worried about that. Look at Warhammer. We just went from 8th edition to 9th edition, and it's great. Like, they looked at the things that didn't work, and they said, let's make it work. Let's make it good. Let's make things make sense. Like, Legion.
So it's not like when they went from like kids. Didn't people like when they went to like 8th edition? Didn't people like burn their armies?
They did, because they did away with a thing with a sacred cow. They killed a sacred cow that had been there forever, that made the game slow down and become more laborious. But then with 9th edition, they said, hey, let's look at these things that don't make sense, and let's make them make sense. And the game feels better than it ever has.
Well, and you're saying that if there's a Legion 2.0, it's fine. I think we're saying, or at least I'm saying, that's not even on the table. X-Wing got a 2nd edition because it had been around for 5 years, and it was getting gunked up with a lot of weird rules, and it was not smooth. And they're like, at this point, we've got to like burn it down and start over, but do it in such a way that you can keep all of the plastic you've already bought.
Yes,
which is nice. Legion has only been around for 2 years, and it's doing fine, and they've had slight adjustments to rules on a few overpowered or underpowered things, and it's fine. And I don't think, I said, I think even if they're brand new teams taking over these games, they're just going to keep working with what the people at Fantasy Flight left for them, and then just, if you don't know the names of the designers, you might never know that anything changed, except that there's a different logo on your box. I don't expect there to be like material changes. I do wonder if, whatever sweatshop they're using in China to produce these miniatures, has a contract with Fantasy Flight, and now I imagine they'd be able to seamlessly sort that out.
You know what? I'm willing to bet that the like the Fantasy Flight and the Atomic Mass shit is already made in the same factory.
Right.
So,
if anything, FFG had organically sourced, ethically grown plastic, and Asmodee has the sweatshops already in place.
That's my.
We might see. I'd say the most immediate change we might see is a change in sculpt, somewhat.
Right. That's
Just 'cause
another
it's
thing I'm very curious about is Fantasy Flight Games has their sculpting department. Atomic Mass obviously has their own sculpting department. Is there going to be any crossover? I doubt it, because the sculpting guys at Fantasy Flight still obviously have a lot of work they can do with all the board games that Fantasy Flight will still be making. Which is sad, because we've seen the Legion sculpting team just knock it out of the park and do things that, the Atomic Mass team haven't been doing, with these like clear plastic things and different poses, and hopefully it's the sculpts for Legion don't take a step back.
But even that, I'm willing to bet it's probably going to be like, with considering like the licensor like approval process and stuff. There's probably already like a year's worth of sculpts that have already been like approved and shit like that. Maybe not that far out, but it's still it's still going to be months and months, I'm sure, before we would really see even that change.
Right. Yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing if there's a huge noticeable change. Maybe like you said, they're a lot more active on Twitter than Fantasy Flight is about promoting their thing. Although they only have one thing to promote, but maybe that's, I don't know.
I mean, that does make life easier, but at the same time, I feel like all of the subsidiaries of Asmodee have not been at their best when it comes to interacting with either fan base or,
speaking of, I think
our branch, which is us,
because we are super professional journalists. I get to say that I reached out to Atomic Mass Games, but they they didn't decline to comment. They just haven't gotten back to me yet. So if they get back to me, I asked them a few questions that I most of which we discussed here. If they get back to me with concrete answers, I'll definitely post an update, unless they're like, "Now we will kill you for telling you this." But so I'll definitely update the world if they get back to me on the questions I asked them, mostly about like, I don't remember what I asked them, like staffing, like do we know exactly who's changing, or the sculpting, is any of the sculpting people carrying over, or I don't remember what else. I asked a few questions that have kind of on the top.
We're going to be moving to Seattle.
Yeah, I wouldn't imagine.
I don't think they're going
to. He's not just like doing sculpting for Legion. He's doing sculpting for all Fantasy Flight. So
well, and that's half the question, is that they don't just do sculpting for miniatures (parentheses Star Wars). They do it for their other board games, like Descent: Legends of the Dark, the new Descent coming out in spring. I mean, theoretically, those are done. They've already been sculpted. It's a matter of casting them. But as far as what they have down the pipeline, we have no idea what's in the pipeline. So it's all, I mean, it's a huge question. It's more than just like using the comparison again of TSR and Wizards of the Coast. We're talking about the EA of board games, where Asmodee is portioning out their licenses to different studios.
Asmodee, can I have some Star Wars? You get 1/4 portion.
I mean, it's, EA has the license for the video games, and they say, okay, we want DICE to make first-person shooters. Motive, apparently you make good flight sims. BioWare, we hear you still make RPGs these days. And that's what it's like here now. They've sent off the RPGs somewhere else. They've sent the miniatures off to Seattle, and the board games are still going to be in Minneapolis. And I'm just...
Roseville.
Board games, I mean, Asmodee... probably owns up like 50 other board game things.
The cities. The cities. Is that better?
Yeah.
Okay.
I was not offended. You could just say Minnesota.
I didn't say the Twin Cities like an outsider.
Yeah. We got to get our Minnesota geography right here, damn it.
Thank you.
The one region of Minnesota, like, well, I think all of Minnesota is probably worth living in, but really that's the place you would want to be. Get away from Minnesota, North Dakota.
No, yeah.
What do you mean flipped? It's never not been.
Despite the efforts of the North.
That's why all like the people are who get to have those like, I don't like the government views, get to have such nice lives because everyone in the city makes up for it and gives them nice progressive policies that helps their state thrive. Sorry.
You're not wrong. You're not wrong.
That's probably a sign we should cut this off now.
It's been about an hour. Yeah, thanks for tuning in, everybody. This has been an emergency meeting. We hit the red button in the cafeteria. Emergency meeting to talk about this. We'll definitely be following this story closely. And yeah, Asmodee is sus. We'll be following this closely and keeping you guys updated as we learn more. Stay tuned to our Discord and our Twitter account for up-to-date news.
Yes. Come to Discord. You don't need to be a patron. Just come to Discord.
There'll be a link in the description here for all that stuff. Let us know your thoughts. If you think the world is falling and atomic mass thugs are going to kick down your door and smash your Legion minis and force you to buy new ones for Legion 2.0, let us know, because you're almost certainly wrong, but it's probably going to be fine. If you don't work for Fantasy Flight Games right now, if they're not your employer, you're probably going to be fine.
Oh, no.
If you do, it's those people I'm worried about. I'm not worried about us.
If you do, come on our show.
Especially if they fire you, then you can spill all the dirt.
But I still want to talk to Jay Little. I still want to talk to him about what it was like developing the RPG.
Yeah, it's like I said, it sucks because we like somewhere between a parasocial relationship and a real relationship with these people, because we know them more than they know us, but we have like interacted with them a couple times, and they're cool and they make these games we like, and I hate for anything bad to happen to them. So hopefully everything works out. It'll almost certainly be fine for the consumer. That's it. That's the news. We did a news. We need a news desk.
We're journalists.
We need weather. Who's doing the weather in sports?
This is like Crossfire.
Oh, okay. Should we have been madder then?
Like the game where you shoot the marbles?
I think this is the libs' fault. The Democrats and the radical left have changed this.
Crossfire!
Are you old enough to even remember Crossfire, Joe? Probably not.
No, that sounded like some sort of like MSNBC show. But the way you guys are talking about it makes it sound like a Nickelodeon show.
No, it's this awesome board game where in the middle it's like soccer with guns that shoot marbles.
Oh wow!
With BB guns.
Yeah, like you like soccer with BB guns. It's amazing. So in the middle of the board you have like a triangle thing with like a ball bearing in it, right?
Okay.
And then the players at each end then have like these little like BB gun things that shoot out marbles, and you try and knock the triangle into the opposing player's goal with your marbles you're shooting out.
That sounds awesome.
It's soccer with guns.
Crossfire!
Crossfire!
This episode of Jodo News brought to you by Crossfire.
Thank you, Milton Bradley.